It was supposed to be the happiest day of Emily Carson's life. Balloons floated in delicate clusters, candles flickered on a cake adorned with her name, and laughter echoed through the apartment she had just decorated herself. Friends toasted her, family smiled, and the air was thick with celebration. But somewhere in the shadows just beyond the party, a quiet, calculated danger was closing in. By the time the sun set on her 24th birthday, the day meant to honor life and love would become the stage for a tragedy so chilling, so sudden, that it would leave every witness questioning how joy could dissolve into horror in the span of a single hour. Emily's story is a stark reminder that danger often hides behind familiar smiles, and that the moments we take for granted may conceal secrets waiting to erupt. Before we begin, if you love true crime storytelling and want to uncover stories that shock, intrigue, and haunt, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows us to bring more real-life suspense and dramatic narratives like Emily's to life. The morning had begun with anticipation, the kind of excitement that makes the air feel electric. Emily Carson awoke to the soft sunlight spilling into her bedroom, a gentle reminder that birthdays are meant for new beginnings, new memories, and the quiet hope that the year ahead will bring nothing but joy. She had spent the previous evening carefully planning the celebration, sending invites to her closest friends, selecting decorations that reflected her personality, and preparing a playlist of songs that would make the day unforgettable. The apartment she had moved into only months earlier now felt like a sanctuary, the walls a canvas for her optimism. And yet, beneath the cheerful surface, subtle details hinted at the tension no one, not even Emily, could perceive. A car had been parked too long across the street, its driver waiting, lingering with purpose. Unfamiliar numbers appeared in her messages, some cryptic, some threatening, each one she dismissed with a nervous laugh. In retrospect, these seemingly minor details would mark the beginning of a descent into horror, a trail of breadcrumbs pointing toward a devastating event that no celebration could mask. By mid-afternoon, the apartment was alive with energy. Friends gathered around, chatting excitedly as they helped inflate balloons, arrange flowers, and prepare small gifts, each gesture meant to convey affection and admiration. Emily, radiant in a lavender dress, moved among her guests with effortless charm, laughing at jokes, accepting compliments, and soaking in the warmth of the people who loved her most. Cameras flashed, capturing moments that would later be replayed in memories and videos, moments that would be tainted with the knowledge that this happiness was fleeting. The scent of vanilla and fresh flowers mixed with the faint aroma of her birthday cake, creating an atmosphere of celebration, anticipation, and innocence. A perfect setting, if innocence were not so fragile. Yet, even in the midst of laughter, a subtle tension began to creep into the room. A shadow at the edge of the doorway, unnoticed by most, seemed to move independently of the crowd, observing rather than participating. Guests remarked on a fleeting chill in the air, an odd disturbance in the light, but dismissed it quickly. Birthdays are meant for joy, and no one wanted to ruin Emily's special day with baseless concerns. Emily herself received a message mid-celebration that made her pause, an innocuous string of text at first glance, but the tone, the timing, and the sender's knowledge of her private plans caused a flicker of unease. She brushed it off, determined to savor the day. Yet instinctively, she could not shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting, and quietly preparing for the moment that would shatter everything. As the afternoon progressed, Emily's friends began gathering around the cake, preparing for the traditional candle-blowing moment. Glasses clinked, cameras were readied, and the room seemed suspended in a moment of perfect celebration. And then, almost imperceptibly, the faintest shift occurred. The shadow by the door moved closer, deliberate but unrecognized. A sense of anticipation, unnoticeable to anyone outside the room, began to ripple through the atmosphere. Emily's laughter continued, bright and unguarded, oblivious to the approaching danger. In the minutes that followed, she would unknowingly step into a scenario that transformed happiness into horror and curiosity into terror, a sequence of events so calculated, so precise, that those who survived the experience would later describe it as the kind of moment that is seared into memory forever. By the time the birthday candles flickered and the room erupted into cheers for Emily, the first elements of disruption had already taken root. A figure loomed just outside, invisible to the human eye from the angles in the room, yet its presence could be felt, a subtle imbalance in the energy of the celebration. Messages on Emily's phone hinted at knowledge only someone extremely close, or extremely observant, could possess. In hindsight, every guest's laugh, every toast, every cheer would be remembered as the backdrop to a slowly unfolding nightmare. Emily's family, caught up in the joy of the day, could not have imagined that within hours, their beloved daughter would no longer be the center of a living, breathing celebration, but rather the tragic heart of an investigation that would grip Los Angeles with disbelief and sorrow. As the party continued, tiny clues began to accumulate in ways that seemed insignificant at the time. A door left slightly ajar, a misplaced gift, a shadow that lingered a fraction too long. Yet no one questioned them seriously. And that is often how the worst crimes unfold, not with immediate violence or alarm, but with the subtle, almost imperceptible signals of a plan in motion. By evening, as the room prepared for the traditional cake cutting, the tension would finally reach a tipping point, marking the moment where joy and fear collided, and the birthday celebration turned into a crime scene that would haunt everyone involved for years to come. If this story has already grabbed your attention, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your support ensures we can continue telling gripping, suspenseful stories like Emily's, diving into the moments where happiness and tragedy collide in ways that leave no one untouched. As the birthday celebration progressed into the early evening, the apartment remained alive with laughter, music, and the soft hum of conversation. Yet beneath the apparent joy, a subtle undercurrent of tension began to pulse through the space. Guests were unaware that each carefully placed decoration, each cheerful interaction, and each moment of levity was being observed with a precision that no ordinary partygoer could detect. Emily, radiant and seemingly carefree, mingled among her friends and family, her laughter infectious, and her smile unwavering. Yet she carried with her a faint unease, a whisper at the back of her mind that something about the day felt off. Her phone, resting on the counter beside the birthday cake, vibrated intermittently with messages from an unfamiliar number, each one meticulously timed to coincide with moments when Emily's attention would be diverted by friends, presents, or the simple thrill of celebration. The messages were calculated, psychologically manipulative in tone, hinting at knowledge of private conversations, subtle threats of exposure, and a silent warning that someone was watching every move she made. It was around this time that one of the guests, a close friend who had known Emily since high school, noticed a figure standing near the edge of the room. A man in his late 20s, tall, unassuming, dressed in dark clothing that blended almost perfectly with the shadows. At first glance, he seemed to be another partygoer, perhaps a colleague of someone in the crowd, yet his eyes were locked entirely on Emily, and his posture exuded an intensity that was almost unnatural in such a jovial setting. No one else seemed to notice the figure, distracted by the merriment and the sparkling candles on the cake, but the friend felt a pang of unease and subtly positioned herself closer to Emily, a protective instinct she could not articulate. Meanwhile, the mysterious man remained stationary, seemingly passive yet fully engaged, every small movement deliberate, every glance calculated to observe, memorize, and internalize. This tension, invisible to most but palpable to a few, set the stage for the events that would follow, events that transformed a day of happiness into an investigation that would shock the city of Los Angeles. The first indication that something was about to spiral out of control came with the cutting of the cake. Emily, holding the knife delicately, smiled at her family and friends, preparing to make her birthday wish. Cameras clicked, voices chorused in anticipation, and the atmosphere seemed almost suspended in a bubble of joy. Yet in those fleeting seconds, the shadowy figure at the edge of the room shifted slightly, taking a subtle step closer, unnoticed. Emily's hand trembled imperceptibly as she focused on blowing out the candles, a brief flash of apprehension crossing her otherwise serene face. She dismissed it almost immediately, attributing it to the excitement of the moment, but investigators would later identify that tiny, fleeting hesitation as a critical psychological marker, an instinctive recognition of danger that had gone unheeded in real time. In retrospect, it was the first ripple of fear in what would become a tidal wave of chaos. As guests cheered and the cake was sliced, a peculiar series of events unfolded that in isolation seemed insignificant, but together created a web of tension that would culminate in tragedy. Emily's phone vibrated again, the message this time more direct, stating that someone knew about her every move and was aware of her plans for the evening. The tone was casual, almost friendly, yet its underlying menace was unmistakable. Guests remained oblivious, assuming that Emily was responding to an enthusiastic friend or an automated message, but her eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and unease. She excused herself from the crowd briefly, moving to a corner of the apartment to respond privately. Investigators later reconstructed these interactions, noting how the sender's intimate knowledge of her schedule suggested premeditation, psychological manipulation, and an unsettling obsession with her daily life. At this point, subtle psychological patterns became clear. The perpetrator, though physically passive, was exerting an invisible control over the room through manipulation of Emily's perception, a technique known to psychologists as coercive intimidation. By sending intermittent, cryptic messages, the individual forced Emily to split her attention between the celebration and the unknown threat, gradually increasing her stress without any overt confrontation. It is a method often used in cases where the intent is to destabilize a target emotionally, creating fear and uncertainty that makes subsequent actions easier to carry out. Emily, bright and resilient as she was, had not yet realized the full extent of the psychological trap she had unknowingly entered. As the evening wore on, friends began gathering for group photographs, positioning themselves near the windows where the city skyline glimmered in the fading light. Emily, smiling broadly for the camera, posed naturally, yet every movement was being observed by the man at the periphery, whose body language indicated meticulous recording of each gesture. Later forensic analysis would reveal that he had documented nearly every expression, every interaction, and every moment in which Emily let her guard down, creating a mental map of her behavior that would become critical in the unfolding of the crime. The juxtaposition of celebration and surveillance heightened the tension in ways imperceptible to most, yet psychologically profound, an invisible pressure that would crescendo in a matter of hours. Dinner followed, a carefully curated selection of Emily's favorite dishes, laughter echoing in the apartment's minimalist interior. The group conversed, exchanged stories, and recounted shared memories, all the while unaware of the silent observer whose presence seemed so ordinary that it could easily be dismissed. Emily herself began feeling a creeping sense of unease, small flickers of doubt, and instinctive fear that she quickly rationalized away. Psychologists would later describe this as a common phenomenon in high-pressure predatory scenarios. The victim experiences subtle physiological and emotional warnings that are often overridden by social conditioning and the expectation of safety within familiar environments. For Emily, the assumption that she was surrounded by friends and family provided a temporary shield, making her more vulnerable to the unexpected escalation that would soon occur. It was during the final moments of dinner that the situation began to tip from psychological pressure into imminent physical threat. The shadow at the edge of the room, previously dismissed as inconsequential, moved deliberately closer. Guests were laughing, voices overlapping in a cheerful cacophony, and Emily, fully absorbed in the moment, did not notice. Yet the perpetrator's actions were precise and measured. The timing was calculated to coincide with a moment when Emily would be least able to respond effectively, ensuring maximum disorientation. In cases like this, law enforcement later explained, predators exploit environmental familiarity, emotional distraction, and momentary lapses in vigilance to achieve control, often in ways invisible to witnesses. As the clock approached the late evening hours, Emily excused herself under the pretext of freshening up, moving to a small hallway adjacent to the living room. It was here, away from the collective gaze of her friends and family, that the invisible tension solidified into a tangible, imminent threat. A brief flash of movement in the reflection of a glass panel confirmed that she was being followed, though she could not yet identify the source. The feeling of being watched, previously abstract and easily dismissed, became undeniable, a psychological imprint that would linger in the minds of those analyzing the case for years to come. It was a fleeting, silent confrontation, but one that would mark the turning point between celebration and catastrophe. At that very moment, investigators concluded the perpetrator had already planned the next steps, ensuring that Emily's position, her moment of vulnerability, and the distractions of the ongoing party aligned perfectly with the intended outcome. Every small decision, the timing of the messages, the shadow's placement, the distractions of the guests, was meticulously orchestrated. By the time Emily returned to the living room, unaware of the danger closing in, the stage had been fully set for a sequence of events that would transform a joyful birthday into a harrowing crime scene that shocked the community, captivated investigators, and left questions about trust, safety, and perception that lingered far beyond the night itself. As part 2 closes, the tension reaches its peak. The invisible predator moves closer, the unseen manipulation of the evening becomes clearer, and the celebration teeters on the edge of a nightmare. In Part 3, we will uncover how this meticulously planned crime unfolded, revealing the horrifying climax, the investigation that followed, and the emotional aftermath that left an indelible mark on everyone involved. If this story has already gripped you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with your thoughts or predictions. Stories like Emily's reveal the chilling intersection of trust, celebration, and danger, and your support allows us to continue bringing them to life. The moment had arrived when the carefully orchestrated tension erupted into action, transforming a birthday celebration into a scene that would haunt every witness for years to come. Emily Carson, laughing moments earlier among friends and family, was suddenly aware of a movement in the corner of the room that she had previously dismissed as inconsequential. Her instincts screamed at her to react, but the combination of social expectation, disbelief, and the disbelief that harm could infiltrate a moment so joyous created a paralyzing hesitation. The intruder, calculated, methodical, and precise, stepped closer, exploiting the brief psychological freeze that occurs when a person is confronted with a danger they never imagined could exist in such familiar surroundings. The apartment, once filled with warmth and celebration, now felt charged with an invisible menace, every sound amplified, every shadow carrying weight. Emily's friends noticed a subtle change in her demeanor, a quickening of her breath, a slight tension in her shoulders, but the energy of the party and the music masked the threat that was closing in. She moved toward the kitchen, ostensibly to refill her glass, yet every step was being monitored, every hesitation noted. The perpetrator had studied her movements for weeks, understanding the ebb and flow of her daily patterns, the spaces where she would feel safest, and the moments when she would be most vulnerable. By the time she reached the corner of the kitchen, a precise set of conditions had been met: distraction, vulnerability, and isolation. Criminal psychologists later described this as a textbook example of situational control, a predator orchestrating the environment to minimize resistance while maximizing opportunity for manipulation and harm. The first confrontation, though sudden, was executed with almost clinical precision. The intruder approached from behind, deliberately avoiding contact with other guests, ensuring that Emily remained the sole focus. Panic flickered across her face, instinctively, as she recognized the presence of someone who should not have been there. Her voice caught as she called for help, but the sound was muffled by the ongoing celebration, laughter, and music that masked the beginning of the struggle. In the chaos of the moment, Emily's friends were initially unaware of the danger, assuming her alarm was part of some playful birthday jest. This small window of misinterpretation, investigators would later note, was a critical factor in the tragedy, highlighting how quickly ordinary spaces can become sites of peril when psychological manipulation and surprise converge. As the struggle intensified, the apartment transformed into a labyrinth of fear and confusion. Furniture shifted, glasses toppled, and balloons drifted like witnesses in slow motion, their strings tangling in the chaos. Emily's attempts to defend herself were instinctive, her energy fueled by fear, but the intruder had anticipated resistance, had mentally rehearsed every move, and had accounted for the layout of the apartment. Every action Emily took, every step she made, was predicted and countered with unnerving accuracy. Witnesses would later describe the scene as surreal, a familiar, joyful environment converted into a theater of terror, with the stark contrast between celebration and violence heightening the psychological horror. Even those unscathed physically were affected, their minds struggling to reconcile the juxtaposition of a birthday party and the deliberate cruelty that had invaded it. The moments that followed were critical in the unfolding investigation. Investigators would identify multiple psychological and forensic markers that illuminated the perpetrator's methods. From the subtle placement of objects to create strategic obstacles, to the careful timing of digital communications to ensure Emily's focus was divided, the crime was orchestrated with chilling foresight. Forensic teams later pieced together how fibers, fingerprints, and digital footprints aligned perfectly with the behavioral analysis conducted during the trial, establishing not only the sequence of events, but the calculated intent behind them. Each small detail, seemingly mundane during the celebration, became evidence of premeditation and control, reinforcing the understanding that the tragedy was not random, but the inevitable result of meticulous planning. As the struggle reached its climax, Emily fell to the ground, her attempts to resist matched by the intruder's persistence and precision. Friends finally realized the danger, rushing toward her, but the perpetrator had engineered the situation to create physical barriers, delays, and confusion, maximizing the window of vulnerability. The sounds of distress, previously muffled by celebration, now rang out sharply, drawing attention from all corners of the apartment. Panic ensued. Some guests attempted to intervene, others froze in shock, and the music, which had only moments before been a source of joy, now underscored the horror of the unfolding crime. Forensic experts later emphasized that this period was critical. The convergence of environmental control, psychological manipulation, and physical aggression created conditions in which resistance was dramatically reduced, illustrating the sophisticated methods predators employ in domestic and social settings. By the time authorities arrived, alerted by frantic neighbors and friends, the apartment was a scene of confusion, fear, and chaos. Emily's injuries were severe, the culmination of an encounter that combined premeditated force with opportunistic timing. Emergency responders quickly assessed the scene, providing aid where possible, yet the psychological impact of witnessing such a violent disruption to a celebration left an indelible mark on everyone present. Investigators meticulously documented every detail: fingerprints, digital evidence, movements, and timelines. Each piece of evidence told a story, not just of the physical events, but of the psychological interplay between victim and perpetrator, illustrating how trust, familiarity, and routine can be exploited to devastating effect. The ensuing investigation captivated Los Angeles and the wider United States. News outlets reported on the horrific circumstances of the crime, highlighting the chilling nature of a birthday celebration turned murder scene. Social media erupted with concern, theories, and discussions about safety, manipulation, and the unpredictability of personal interactions. Experts in criminal psychology weighed in, explaining how seemingly minor behavioral cues, digital messages, and environmental factors could all contribute to creating an opportunity for crime. Emily's story, tragic yet instructive, became a cautionary tale for communities across the nation, illustrating the fragile boundary between ordinary life and catastrophic events, and the importance of vigilance, awareness, and the recognition of subtle psychological threats. In the courtroom, the trial that followed unraveled the meticulous planning of the perpetrator. Prosecutors presented a damning reconstruction. Digital communications, surveillance footage from nearby streets, and forensic evidence within the apartment all pointed to premeditation, control, and deliberate timing. Defense attorneys attempted to portray the act as impulsive, yet the overwhelming pattern of planning and psychological manipulation left the jury with little room for doubt. Expert witnesses testified to the behavioral dynamics, explaining how the orchestrated sequence of distractions, physical positioning, and psychological pressure created an environment in which the victim's natural reactions were neutralized. The combination of methodical planning and situational awareness, they argued, demonstrated an intentional targeting of Emily in a space where she was meant to feel safe. When the jury returned with a verdict, the atmosphere was heavy with emotion. Justice, however delayed, had been served, yet the scars remained, for Emily's family, for her friends, and for the community that had witnessed the fragility of safety in familiar spaces. The story of Emily Carson became more than a crime report. It became a narrative of caution, of the intersection of human psychology, trust, and the unpredictable nature of evil disguised as ordinary life. It reinforced the importance of recognizing subtle signs, understanding behavioral patterns, and questioning moments that feel off, even in settings as seemingly joyful as a birthday celebration. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Emily's apartment, once the stage for laughter and joy, stood as a silent testament to the fragility of happiness, the danger of unnoticed manipulation, and the devastating impact of calculated violence. Her story, preserved through investigative diligence, psychological analysis, and courtroom testimony, continues to haunt those who study it, forcing reflection on the invisible lines between trust and threat, celebration and tragedy. If Emily's story has gripped you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Stories like hers reveal how even the happiest moments can harbor unseen danger, and your engagement allows us to continue bringing these gripping, emotional, and cautionary tales to life.